I loved watching college football this last weekend. And, I didn't even have to watch this game. And, just knowing even without a head coach that Michigan was going to prevail and beat Penn State and beat James Franklin. And honestly, I don't even think Michigan beat James Franklin. I think James Franklin beat himself. Didn't punt the ball in the fourth quarter when your defense has been playing really good all day, most of it. Has the chance you can get the ball back, but instead goes for it on fourth down. Michigan gets the ball. Michigan scores. Guys, it's time. You know, pull out the keys, find the bus, tell James Franklin, pack it up, get on it, go home. If you're a Penn State fan and you're looking at me like, Chase, you're too hard. James Franklin's a good coach. He's got a great record. And if you're in college football nowadays, definitely moving to a 12-team playoff, and you're saying all that stuff to me, are you chasing records or are you chasing championships? Because if you're chasing a 10-2 record every year, man, keep James Franklin at the helm. Personally, I love it because they're not a threat. But if you want a championship at some point, James Franklin has served his purpose. He's got a great record, but he just can't win the big game, man. He can't beat the big two. Jim Harbaugh wasn't even coaching the other day. You had an interim head coach, and you find ways to not only let Michigan beat you, but you beat yourself. And guys, seen it all, done it all. I mean, James Franklin has a pretty well-built team. I was actually kind of surprised how close that game was. But it's time. It's time. There is no way after the end of this season that you say, hey, James Franklin, you know what? You've been here long enough. You'll get over this hump next year. He won't. It's time. It's time to go. You fired your OC thinking that's the problem. It's not. It's James Franklin. And I can't sit here with the breath in my lungs and breathe out the air that says James Franklin should stay next year. I don't. I think he should be fired. As soon as this season concludes, get you a bowl win, wherever it's at, move on. Freddie, you look surprised. Is there something on your mind, man?
I just completely disagree. Yes, he can't seem to get over the hump. He's 3-15 versus Ohio State and Michigan combined since his tenure started at Penn State, and that is a horrible record. I will say that myself. However, the stats beyond that kind of say he shouldn't be fired. Right now, yes, these are your two most important games, your biggest games of the year, right? But including this year, he's looking at 5 10-plus win seasons, 0 losing seasons, by the way, a Big Ten title, 4 AP top 10 finishes, and 3 New Year's Six Bowl wins. In his tenure there, that's averaging a New Year's Six Bowl win every 3 seasons, an AP top 10 finish every other season, and 10-plus wins more than half of his tenure. So to sit here and say that he should be fired based upon his performance versus Ohio State and Michigan, I don't think is necessarily true. Now, firing the offensive coordinator is a great idea. It seems like Penn State has never, ever been able to have a quarterback that is worth anything more than a trash can. And that, to me, seems to be the problem. Their defense is always really, really good. That's the reason why they win 10-plus games, no matter who the defensive coordinator is. Now they have Manny Diaz, but before then it wasn't him, so you can't say it's on him. I just think that they need to go out and hire an offensive coordinator that is with the times, that is electric, that has a track record of scoring a butt ton of points, and then recruit those kind of players on offense and see what happens. Because personally, I think he is a very good football coach. I mean, all those things that I just read off, averaging a New Year's Six Bowl win every other year, top 10 finish every other year, like, whoever they get to replace James Franklin may be able to beat Ohio State and Michigan, but I don't think they would have the consistency of success that he has there, no matter who it is. Personally, unless it's Urban Meyer, but I don't think Urban Meyer really would come, coach at Penn State. He may, but I just don't know who else you get that would be able to have that consistency and, possibility of making the Big Ten championship. It seems like every year they're one win away from the Big Ten championship whether that is Michigan or Ohio State. Um, and now with the 12-team playoff and the no divisions in the Big Ten, there's a chance that they may not play both of them every single year moving forward. Granted, they may have to play Oregon. I think they could beat Oregon. Washington, I think they could beat Washington. But I just don't think they need to fire him. I really don't. Quinn?
Um, you look at my perspective on Penn State is this. If you want to let him go because he does not beat Ohio State and Michigan, okay, your goal is to win championships, and I can respect that decision making if you can answer me this question. Who are you going to get that you can ensure me will, one, hold up consistently outside of those games, and two, win those games? Do you have a coach off the top of y'all's head right now?
My first one is Dan Lanning. I open a blank check. I think he could do it.
Do you think Dan Lanning's going to leave Oregon, who's about to go to the Big Ten and is about roughly the same size program as Penn State, to just play it or coach at another Big Ten school?
With that, I would say Oregon is going to have more stress on them as an organization in the Big Ten than Penn State would, and it might seem a little more appealing in that sense due to travel things, financials, all that. That may be. Go ahead.
The reason I personally sit opposed to replacing Franklin is because I don't think there's a huge list of coaches that are drastically more impressive than him.
Right.
I don't think that number is very big. And of the ones that you can guarantee me are an upgrade, I just don't believe they would leave Penn or leave wherever they currently are. Not because Penn State's like a significantly worse situation, just because it's a parallel move. And why put yourself through like the instability of change?
Okay.
Right. So that being said, do you think James Franklin can overcome those teams? I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility in a future Big Ten where he doesn't have to play them every year. Will he beat Ohio State or Michigan if he has to play them? I'm not going to sit here and tell you he will. I think they're better programs than Penn State. I don't necessarily believe that Washington, Oregon, or USC are drastically ahead of them. Mainly because we've seen Penn State, when they play big games that aren't named Ohio State or Washington, they win. And that's the thing that makes people believe Penn State will come over that edge. So I think there is some merit to the fact that they could get themselves in a situation where they're playing in the Big Ten title and then they just have to pull the upset that one day. It's not a list of this needs to happen and this needs to happen. You just got to be able to this year you played through the Big Ten and your toughest game was Wisconsin, and now you've got to beat Michigan. If you can do it, congrats, you've won the Big Ten.
Right.
So I don't necessarily think moving on from him is the right move, mainly because of where the coaching landscape is right now. There's not a dude, and granted, there's not always a dude that you know is a surefire thing.
Right.
And you take that risk and it works. And it's really up in the air, but all I'm saying is if you're Penn State right now, you're in a more stable and successful like level of competition than you've been at in a long time with James Franklin. If you get rid of him, you run the risk of dropping that. And while we sit here and think, oh, it's a guaranteed slam dunk, that doesn't mean in 4 years from now when Penn State's losing games to Iowa and they're going like 8-4 that we don't look back on getting rid of James Franklin and think it's the worst decision ever because you lost a very stable, steady hand. You just have not achieved that last step. You could do it at any point. How long did it take? And I'm not saying they are this team. How long did it take Kirby Smart to overcome his big hurdle? You had to overcome Alabama. It took 4 or 5 years. Right now, relative, Georgia was where Penn State is now when Kirby Smart came in, maybe a little worse, right? Where they were like getting there and not getting over the hump, right? Penn State, when James Franklin came in, was in shambles after the stuff with, what was it, Sandusky? Yeah. So, like, you're coming into two completely. So, yeah, he's been there longer than 5 years, but where he started, it was going to take a while to get Penn State back into the competitive arena because of where they were when he came in.
Right. And to kind of go back to that point, you made a great comparison with Georgia. And I think James Franklin is Mark Richt. So the next guy you hire, what if that's Kirby Smart for you, for your program? And so that's you're sitting here year after year with James Franklin. And it's like, oh, I know we're going to win 10 games. I know we're going to win 11 games, but are we going to beat Ohio State or Michigan to get to the playoffs, to do this, to be competitive?
But see, my problem is I don't think there's a Kirby Smart level guy out there right now. Like if you're Georgia and you're looking across the way when they hired Kirby, the dude that's been at the right hand of the dude that's won 4 national titles in like 6 years, who
Right.
is an alumni of our school, and we have a chance to get him. That's a slam dunk. I have been pro Kirby ever since Georgia made that move. I don't think there's a dude right now that is that. So do you abandon the steadiness for turbulence, or do you hold on to the steadiness until you're willing to make that move on somebody who you know is the slam dunk move? Or maybe James Franklin busts through.
I want to, so I hit on the Big Ten and their scheduling moving forward with no conferences and then adding, some of the Pac-12 schools. Penn State's schedule next year shapes up for them, and I'm going to say 11-1 simply because they do play Ohio State. They do not play Michigan next year. They draw UCLA at home, at USC. Both of those are wins. Then they play Ohio State at home next year, so you never know, at home field. And they play Washington at home. And then obviously like the rest of the games, Maryland at home, at Minnesota, at Purdue, at Wisconsin. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that next year they go 11-1 and make the playoffs and even potentially make the Big Ten championship game. Because even if they lose to Ohio State but beat everybody else, they're still in the Big Ten championship game, unlike in previous years with them in the same division. And I think Big Ten championship game, neutral field, I think Penn State probably has a better chance to win. So I don't know. I think you give it a couple more years personally and see what he can do in the 12-team playoff. And the new Big Ten look. And I mean, hey, if he goes 11-1 next year, only lost to Ohio State, are you going to say the same thing? He needs to be fired?
Yes, because like I mentioned earlier, is it about record or is it about winning a championship?
But that's absurd because if you're at 11-1 and make, let's just say, the Big Ten championship game, or if you don't even make the Big Ten championship game somehow, but make the playoffs and win a couple games, is that not a success?
Like he just mentioned about Mark Richt and Kirby Smart, and I get the point that Quinn made about there's not a Kirby Smart out there, but Mark Richt was doing the same thing, getting the SEC championship, winning 10, 11 games, but he wasn't going to be a championship level coach and never was going to be. So James Franklin, it's basically you're sitting there like, hey, I'm going to get these wins, but is it going to amount to anything? Because every single football team, when you start the season, group of 5, power 5, whatever, says, I'm going to win a championship. And if you're just okay getting 10 or 11 wins, whatever. Nick Saban, if he loses 2 or 3 games, I'm not excited because Nick Saban's goal is to win a championship. That's what I'm looking at. Dabo Swinney, those are championship level coaches, and we're trying to put them in James Franklin in the stratosphere of that he can be a championship winning coach when he can't be. He is a bona fide Lane Kiffin without the personality. Overrated, just overrated. He's going to get the wins, but he's not going to win anything significant.
I disagree, but hey, that's what we're about here.
Yeah. Hey, 3 bold takes, baby.